scenes in the life of Armida Barelli and some of her works. They give you an insight, I think, into what made her tick, really. And they were compiled by Letizia Vanzetti, who was one of her dearest collaborators and had worked with her for a long, long time and is still part of the Catholic University in Milan. And we have a prepared text, which Chris and I are going to read simply because we've gone over it. We did last week. And we're going to do our best to synchronize it with the slides that Mickey is going to show you. These slides, of course, were put together in Italy, and they fit into Mickey's projector. They don't fit into a carousel projector. Each OSIS has been given a set of these slides, so this set we are going to be permitted to keep here, and we'll have them for use, by all of the missionaries at any time. Now, Chris and I are going to read the text, and if we think anything should be added, or if Maria wants to add anything, we're going to ask her and let her ad-lib a little bit. We're going to try to keep this, we have to keep this within our hour's time. We hope we're going to be able to do so.
We have gathered here to celebrate the 20th...
Can you hear us?
Can you hear it? Is it on?
No.
Celebrate the 20th anniversary of the birth of Armida Barelli, the servant of God, into the eternal light. The attitude to participate in this celebration is personal and cannot be suggested. However, we think it wise to say that those who thought of collecting and presenting some moments of the life of this woman have been guided neither by aesthetic principles. Some very critical spirits may consider this series of slides as an old family album, nor by historical purposes. Everybody knows that Armida Barelli lived in a period of both historical and political tensions, which if duly studied would enlighten us even better about her work. Our aim is to present, and perhaps here lies the importance of this effort, through the memories of people who lived with Armida Barelli, a life experience with a message valid for our time. The communion which makes the dead present among those still living stimulates us to consider our way of walking, at times so clumsy and shy, so that not only our feelings are moved, but we are encouraged to go on. We receive strength, certainty, and joy. Most of the comments on these slides are taken from the authentic writings of Armida Barelli and Father Gemelli, and from the book A Woman Between Two Centuries by Maria Stico. Some quotations are taken from the book Armida Barelli, written by Irma Corsaro,
That's the wrong one.
who was one of the most active, faithful, and intelligent collaborators of Armida Barelli.
In the will of Father Gemelli, we read, "All my collaborators should remember that though I seem to have been a founder of several works, these would never have been started without the zeal, the piety, the cleverness, and above all the supernatural spirit inspired by Armida Barelli." And in the preface of the book by Irma Corsaro, Father Gemelli wrote, "When I met Armida Barelli, she was young and beautiful. She was not an exceptionally pious person from birth," Father Gemelli adds, "but she became so later. She had not always been a creature of extraordinary interior life, but little by little, thanks to grace and her strong will, she developed an exceptional personality, capable of sacrifice and heroism, both in action and in suffering, as we saw, especially during the last years of her life."
Armida Barelli was educated at this boarding school, Menzingen, Switzerland. As early as her teens, she seemed to be gifted with a particularly lively character and a strong will. Ida could not bear the methodic discipline which sometimes seemed to mortify her personality. As every morning they had to do the same thing, she organized things in her dormitory. 2 were to make beds, 2 were to sweep, 2 polished everybody's shoes, while she told stories. Daily the others changed their jobs, but Ida's was always the same.
Don't anybody get any ideas?
With the passing of years and thanks to the help of the grace, her volitive temperament became the basis of her Christian life. The imagination she had had as a storyteller changed into her originality of initiative and into fascinating eloquence for the kingdom of God. On the ceiling of the chapel of the boarding school of Menzigen that we now see, an artist struck by the fresh beauty of the girl wanted to reproduce the portrait of Armida Barelli as if she were an angel.
Then the time to leave boarding school arrived. Though she had longed for this moment in the long years of study, she felt a bit sad. A phase of life had closed, another starts. The girls around Armida Barelli hid the sadness of separation, making plans for the future. What will we be within 10 years? I want to travel. Oh, I'll be a teacher. I want to get married, said another one very frankly. And I, said Armida Barelli, standing on a bench, I'll be a missionary in China, or I'll have 12 children. Remember well that Armida Barelli will be either a nun or a mother, but she won't be a spinster in any case. Later, St. Francis showed her another way. Now we shall see her in her family life.
Armida Barelli belonged to a Milanese family of the middle class, of very strict moral principles, but rather far from the church. Such attitude was typical of the middle class in Milan in the 19th century. However, many generous militants in the Catholic action were of Lombard families of that kind. Armida Barelli was one of these.
Can you pick her out? Mm-hmm. Okay. Hmm? Yeah, with her hand, yeah. Would you ask? Watch the wire.
Nel centro Ida, il padre, no, il padre, la madre, una vecchia zia dopo la madre,
Hold hand to the mother. Mm-hmm.
forse il marito di una sorella. Senti, dopo il ragazzo, quella è un'altra sorella. E quella la sorella minore, Mary.
Mary. Her
E
little
quella-
sister Mary.
Ecco. Non lo so. Invece l'altra Gemma,
That's Jenna.
Gemma, la sorella seconda, che è ancora viva. Gemma è ancora viva,
Mm-hmm. She's still.
quella che sta vicino al ragazzo,
Mm-hmm.
è ancora viva, è una bella signora.
Mm.
Questo è il fratellino, fratello di Ida, che è morto. Fratello. Aveva due fratelli, ma lì ce n'è uno solo.
Both the brothers were,
Aveva due fratelli e 4 sorelle.
she had 4 sisters and 2 brothers. And the
They
2
don't
brothers
show me.
were unbelievers. Both of them.
Sono
Like, they
tutti
were
morti, tranne la sorella seconda, quella
all
che...
the members of Armida Barelli are dead, with the exception of the Gemma, that one on the left side. She said she's still living, and also she is a beautiful lady. Is she married? Sposata.
è bisnonna!
Yes, she is 3 times.
Ha 89 anni.
89 years
She's
old.
89 years old.
È bisnonna
Gemma.
e ha 33 nipoti. Tra
She has
nipoti,
33
pronipoti.
grandchildren.
33 grandchildren.
89 anni.
She's married already.
She made up for Armida.
Yeah, okay.
Ida was very fond of her family and lived the family life joyfully. She spent happy hours with her brothers. She was very fond of the sea and spent the whole summer at the seaside.
Yeah.
Then her mother bought this villa at Marzio in a pleasant spot in the valley of Lugano. When Ida was busy in the work for Catholic Action in the Catholic University, the villa of Marzio became her summer refuge,
Mickey?
where she used to work quietly, wrote books, prepared lectures, answered lots of letters. The window before her writing desk opened on the beautiful park of the villa. Ida invited her nearest collaborators to Marzio to work or to plan future work. Here is Ida with Marquezina Pallavicino, who was more like a sister than a friend. And here is Ida near the little chapel of St. Francis in the garden of the villa with her secretaries and collaborators.
Would she identify those people for us?
Sì, tutto.
Sembra vicino, così.
Tutto.
Ricominciamo da dove?
Cominciando
Beginning
da
from the
destra,
right side.
era Marchetina Pallavicino la solita.
The Armid's friend
Adesso.
Marquezina Pallavicino from the right side.
Anna la seconda in
The
sinistra,
second from the right,
E Anna
Anna
Tolentino.
Tolentino.
che adesso è impiegata all'ospedale Gemelli,
She
alla
is,
clinica Gemelli.
she is employed at the clinic, Gemel's clinic in Rome.
Questa in avanti è Marisa Scolari, la segretaria dell'università,
Mhm.
famosa.
Yeah.
The secretary at the Catholic University is the second one.
Well, she was Father Gemelli's secretary for years.
Scolari?
And Scolari until he died.
Marisa
Mhm.
Scolari. Quella vicina a Scolari e sotto la Barelli si chiamava Agnesi, è morta. Ha assistito alla Barelli fino a lì.
The lady close to Armida is dead now, but she took care of Armida for many, many years.
Era di una famiglia di
She was from Genoa.
Mhm.
She always went to Marzio with her mother and cared for her. She was close to her and led her to a fervent Christian life, as we know from a note that her mother wrote to her on the 1st of December, 1921. May God give you life and health to continue your works and to close the eyes of your mother, who wants to die happily in your arms. Though
Do you
Ida
have
was
one more? Hmm? No, okay.
Though Ida was often away from home, you want me to read?
No, go ahead.
Because of her duties, she deeply loved everybody in her family. In her journeys, she often managed to visit one or the other of her relatives, though for a very short period. She followed everybody's activities, though she was very busy with her work. She was always present at the family events, both happy and sad. Ida was the first to know the sorrows of her relatives. She wrote to a friend, Mary and Vittoria have telephoned asking for my help. We unmarried have always to encourage those who are married. Let it be for God's sake.
Now we have to give the operator a moment to change things.
Maybe I can tell you what Maria Steve told me during the first week. She said, seems that the Lord gave us a vocation, so when the relatives are in need, we are right there. She said many Italian missionaries have really given their life completely to God in serving their parents have been bedridden or even just cousins or aunts. And so one missionary right now has to give up the profession of teaching psychology because she has two old aunts who are completely paralyzed. And she gave up her own teaching and the income she can live on what she has in reserve. And she gave completely of her profession just to take care of all the sisters. So she said we should remember that when we do something for our family, it's not a matter of duty, but it's a law.
Armida Barelli wrote, I met Father Gemelli on the 11th of February, 1911. His strong personality and his original and genuine way of interpreting and living the Franciscan spirit had great influence on my spiritual life. In 1913, Father Gemelli wrote to her from Rome, "May God help you and let you become a lay saint after the example of the first Christian virgins and martyrs, in the real meaning of this word, a lay person but a saint."
In the meantime, Ida had 2 proposals of marriage, one better than the other, but she refused both. Her parents couldn't understand such refusals, and when there was another very good proposal, they urged her to accept the engagement. Her spiritual director invited her to be patient. Love would come, he said. But Ida unsheathed her weapon. "All right," she said, "I won't take any steps to interrupt the engagement, but I'll pray to the Holy Virgin that I may die before the marriage." All were amazed at the firm decision shown by Ida, and of course the marriage was never celebrated. In the same year, 1913, Ida wrote in her diary, "I anxiously await the Feast of the Sacred Heart to make a definitive decision, and on the Feast of the Sacred Heart, with the help of her spiritual director, Ida became certain that her vocation was to a life consecrated to God and the world. In 1919, she went to Cortona. On March 6, 1919, Armida Barelli tells, "I went to Cortona to ask, through the intercession of the dear great Franciscan St. Margaret, for the love for God and for help in the 3 works just beginning, the Catholic University of Milan, the Feminine Youth of Catholic Action, the Franciscan Family for the Lay Apostolate in the world." Then here at San Damiano Assisi, Ida matured her ideal of Franciscan life, consecrated in the world for the coming of the kingdom of the Sacred Heart, and every year she returned to that holy place to make her retreat.
Father Gemelli writes, "I think that Armida Barelli was faithful to a formula of Franciscan life which can be summarized as follows: to eliminate superfluous wishes, to be active according to one's vocation so that no space is left for imagination and sentimentalism, to walk always along the main road in the sun, to be happy with little and to be satisfied with everything, to live day by day according to the poverty which makes us free, to wait for suffering as a friend, to love it jealously as a sign of love, to trust God and to see His will always." Her consecration to God was very fruitful.
Her first work was the consecration of the soldiers to the Sacred Heart in 1917. Ida, ill with a lung disease, wrote to Father Gemelli, "Pray for my health now, so that I may be able to work for the consecration of the soldiers to the Sacred Heart, no matter if I'll fall ill forever after this." But Father Gemelli answered with his usual style, "No, because there are more things to do." In the meantime, from April 1916 to 1918, Ida became his secretary while he was at the front, at the headquarters of the armed forces. Ida wrote, "Father Gemelli sent me 6 pages of orders from the front and a kilo of correspondence, letters without envelopes to answer. Once I lost my patience and wrote to him not to behave like the Tsar because I was not Poland." In her diary, Ida wrote, 1917, first Friday of January, official consecration of 2 million soldiers to the Sacred Heart with distribution of holy cards with an inscription translated into several languages. "The consecration was more helpful than the celebration of Easter," said the chaplains of the army. "It was an abundance of graces for the soldiers serving in the 3 sectors, land, sea, and air, with confessions, with communions. The publishing house, the Opera della Regalata, worked for the soldiers in the wars. In 1936, in Ethiopia, 500,000 copies of the Gospel were distributed. Then in
That's Gemelli on the left.
Yes, the left one is Father.
Mhm.
So the sinistra è Father Gemelli.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. he flew his own plane, you know. It just before a lot of other people flew their own planes.
He's got Sam.
I, we still have a little more script here. Wait a minute.
Then in 1941, 42, 43, 2 million rosaries and holy cards of the Sacred Heart were distributed to create a bond between Italian families and the soldiers at the various fronts.
He was almost 60 years old on that picture. He received the rank twice. What do you call it? Instruction. You can tell the story.
No, not now. Okay.
He was 60 years old when he received the
Yeah. Another great work of Armida Barelli was The Feminine Youth of Catholic Action. In January 1918, an atheistic teacher had called stupid those people who went to Mass. Some male students had stood up to defend their religion, but 32 girls had made no objection, though most of them were Catholic and some were daily communicants. They lacked the awareness and the courage of their faith. The news of this fact spread quickly among the Catholics of Milan and impressed Armida Barelli, who understood how urgent was the need to give young women knowledge of their faith. She then went to Cardinal Ferrari, the Archbishop of Milan, who had already asked her to do something to solve this problem. In this photo, we see Cardinal Ferrari 2 years later when he was very ill. "Your Eminence," Edith told him, "here I am. I repent for not obeying your invitation the first time. Now I'm ready to do everything you wish." That was the beginning of the feminine youth in Milan.
Armida Barelli writes, in September 1918, in a memorable audience, Pope Benedict XV gave me the task of founding the feminine youth all over Italy. Leaving the Vatican, I had the strange impression that I no longer belonged to myself. I was ready to do anything. To the question that crowded my mind, my heart replied confidently, "I don't know, but I trust the Sacred Heart." A great number of young women joined the Catholic Action. The association grew abundantly in all the dioceses in Italy. The Apostolic Institute Sacred Heart of Castelnuovo Fogliani was the ideal summer meeting place for the priests and the young women who were to be the leaders of the feminine youth. Memorable courses were held by Monsignor Francesco Olgiati, an unrivaled teacher, by Cardinal Piazzi, Monsignor Cavagna, Monsignor Lanza. Many were the retreats, some preached by Monsignor Mazzati, to whom Armida Barelli was very close. Armida Barelli was able to find excellent collaborators. She discovered their hidden qualities. Go ahead. To discover their hidden talents, to point out how to develop them.
Would Maria want to tell us something about the relationship between Archbishop Mazzati and Armida? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Padre Arcangelo fu il direttore spirituale di Padre Gemelli e anche della Barelli. Era il direttore spirituale. Padre Arcangelo conobbe, lo dirò domani, conobbe Padre Gemelli quando era militare e fu uno di quelli che fu servitù alla sua conversione. Poi diventò arcivescovo di Sassari e qui è presentato come arcivescovo di Sassari. Ma fu fino all'ultimo il confessore.
Father Mensah was the spiritual director of Father Gemelli Church and then of Armida. They were also a good friend and they worked together for the feminine youth too. This picture was taken when Father Mensah was Archbishop of Sardinia.
Sardinia. Hmm? But that's all right.
Would you feel like coming to give some help in Milan? She asked one young woman from southern Italy whose eyes showed keenness. She moved north and became a very good leader. God wants something great from you, she told another who had never thought of such a thing. This one left a life of comforts and gave herself totally to the apostolate, in spite of her family's strong opposition.
Armida Barelli was very much appreciated by the Pope. Father Gemelli writes, something happened here, girl. Go on to the next one. See what the next one is. This is supposed to be, that's it. Okay. The reason why Armida Barelli was appreciated by 3 popes was that her spirit of faith revealed itself in her words, plans, and questions. The simplicity and ingenuity in the most elevated meaning of this word, with which she spoke to the Vicar of Christ, awoke his love. Father Gemelli continues, I was told this by Pius XI, who always listened to her with particular fatherly benevolence when she expressed proposals and plans. Armida Barelli was happy to present the members of feminine youth and the aspirants to the Holy Father. This was at the Colosseum, as you can see. There were the Benjamins, the little ones from 6 to 10 years old, the Piccolissimi from 4 to 6 years old, and the little angels under 4 years old. In memorable audiences, these expressed the freshness and joy of their faith and their strong fidelity to the Church.
Look at the shoes. They're exactly the same size.
Yeah, see that? Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Look at them. Okay, Anna. Wait just a minute. No. Well, Pius the 11th. That's the 12th. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
It says 11, doesn't it?
Well, I did have Pius the 11th in what we were reading, but that is Pius the 12th. Okay.
Stimulated by the ardent wish to let all young women know the Christian message, she organized the Young Women's Weeks all over Italy with the aim of reaching young women belonging to all social classes. At the end of the week, there was usually a general communion in the cathedral or in an outdoor place as it happened at Valentino. Armida Barelli was aware of the problems of the formation of personality and achieving harmony between spontaneity and renunciation, the most delicate point of Christian education. Courageously, she sought to solve this problem through love of the crucified Lord and with charity toward others. Once Cardinal Schuster visited a group of leaders who were having a study week. The Cardinal answered the greeting of Armida Barelli, commenting on the matter which had been discussed at that meeting. Concerning fashion, said the Cardinal, before one worries about dresses and stockings, minds must be educated.
As early as 1919, Armida Barelli, according to the Franciscan way of life, worked to break down the old barriers existing among social classes and to establish fraternity among the members of the feminine youth. In this spiritual work to establish unity, she was helped by Rina Bianchi, a worker from Vigevano, bold and sincere and able to speak in political debates with great eloquence, and also by Marchesa Pallavicino from Parma, whom Ida had come to know in a meeting in Rome. In 1931, the feminine youth underwent a very serious test. While Armida Barelli was in Warsaw for an international meeting of the Association of Catholic Action, she received a telegram, "Come back immediately." Armida Barelli writes, "I thought a tragedy must have happened at home. I went to the travel agency to reserve a seat in the plane, but the plane had already left. So I left by the evening train and reached Vienna in the morning. I stopped there to take communion at St. Stephen's and heard the newspaper men crying, The Feminine Association of Catholic Action in Italy has been abolished. I hurried to the altar of the Blessed Sacrament and said, Jesus, the feminine youth is yours. If you make it share in your death, make it share in your resurrection too. I trust you. In the evening I reached Italy and then left for Rome. I asked the Holy Father for an audience, and my request was granted immediately. I told him of my sorrow for the brutal action of the fascists. I wanted a number of Squealy, that's the magazine of the feminine youth, to be issued immediately to give directions and to keep the 10,000 affiliates united. The prefect of Milan had told me, Squealy can be published provided the subtitle, The Organ of the Feminine Youth, is abolished. No, said the Pope, if it can't be issued as the organ of feminine youth, it can't be issued. And then I asked, they will cede, they must cede, they will cede. He pronounced these words with force. He gave me 2 holy cards, one of St. Nereus and of Achilles, telling me, can you understand the meaning of these pictures? I can, Holy Father, I said. With the grace of the Lord until martyrdom, and guided by this spirit, the feminine youth started its activity again, but only with strictly religious and moral projects, because the totalitarian fascist government did not allow social activities.
Later, in 1938, at the Colosseum, the 20th anniversary of the feminine youth was celebrated in a spirit of thanksgiving and prayer. Armida, or that if they should die, they die as Christians. Father Gemelli answered me, promise to help me, Monsignor Olgiati and Necchi, to found the Institute of Philosophy, Mary the Immaculate, the first step of the Catholic University. Even better, let's promise that together, if the 3 of us come back.
Those 3, that's Monsignor Olgiati, the priest, and the other one is Vico Necchi, the tertiary, and of course Father Gemelli in the center. Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, this is 1915. We've gone back. This is actually now telling you the story of the founding of the Catholic University. See, so it goes back to 1915. The war ended. They all came home safe and began to think about founding the Catholic University. In the year 1918 and 19, a site was looked for. The Palazzo Canonica in Via San Agnese No. 2 seemed to be fit for the purpose, but to buy it, it was necessary to pay 1 million lira at once, and that's when a lira was worth a lot of money, you know, it's not like it is today. Armida Barelli asked Count Lombardo for the money, but he answered, my money is for the poor, and I won't give a single penny for science. At 3 p.m., the agreement for purchase of the Palazzo Canonica was to expire, and while Father Gemelli and Monsignor Olgiati and Necchi were already disappointed and resigned to the fate, Armida Barelli arrived with a note from Count Lombardo with the following words, your Sacred Heart doesn't give me one moment of peace, and I want my peace, so here is the 1 million. So the Catholic University had its first location with the little chapel where there was daily adoration supported by the members of the feminine youth of Milan. No. Here we can see Father Gemelli, Count Lombardo, Armida Barelli, and others in the first location on Via San Agnese.
Father Gemelli writes, in 1924, we had to obtain from the state the registration of the Catholic University as a free university. There were long, endless talks. The only person to be among the members of the National Education Council was Giovanni Gentili, who, after a long talk with me, in which we considered all the pros and cons, suggested that it was better to renounce the first article of the statutes, which stated that moral education, according to the principles of Catholicism, was to be given. After the answer of Gentili, I hurriedly convoked the committee, and all agreed to accept his proposal. if it was the only way to establish our university. Only Armida Barelli was against this decision. Face the struggle. Father Gemelli, you go and give the answer, and tomorrow morning I shall celebrate Mass so that the will of God be done. Father Gemelli continues his account saying, when the National Education Council met for the great decision, I was in the Church of the Minerva, Rome, praying. A trustworthy person who was to tell me the decision of the council came running into the church and said, everything has been approved and all is well. Father, come at once. President Gentili wants to see you. The Sacred Heart also won this time.
In that period, they also had to guarantee the financial status for the university. Armida Barelli, with her practical sense, organized the University Day, mobilizing the members of feminine youth to collect money in the parishes all over Italy. She also organized the Great Family of Friends. After juridical recognition, the Catholic University developed. It lived, it grew, and it flourished, as had been the Pope's wish, and the wish came true. In 1929, the Catholic University was moved from the Via San Agnese to Piazza San Ambrogio, now called the Largo Gemelli, to the wonderful building designed by Bramante to offer room to the thousands of students who wished to get a qualified degree. It was a common opinion that at the Catholic University the students studied hard and the teaching staff was highly qualified. The activity of the new seat started in 1929 with the buildings and offices. Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament began in the chapel, where there is still the beautiful picture of the Sacred Heart. The Chapel of the Sacred Heart is at the entrance of the university, as an invitation for all to stop and pray and to give thanks. The years from its foundation until 1942 were very fruitful for the university, with good results in cultural fields, in scientific research, and in the formation of its students. In 1943, however, the activity of the university was paralyzed because the buildings were bombed.
A year later, Armida Barelli wrote, August 1944, month dedicated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Last year, on the feast of her Assumption, the Holy Virgin asked me for my house with all its furnishings, when a bombardment destroyed the seat of the Feminine Youth of Catholic Action, the seat of Opera della Regalata, and harmed the Catholic University. The Holy Virgin lifted me in her arms and almost took the sorrow from me. I adored and made my offering. This year, on the second sorrowful anniversary, I again adore and renewed my offering. In 1945, with the Reconstruction, there was an unexpected revival, and new faculties and seats were opened. The Faculty of Agriculture at Piacenza, Mandola, Brescia, Rome. Armida Barelli didn't have the joy of seeing the birth of the Faculty of Medicine, for which she had longed, but she contributed to it by her offering and suffering. In fact, in 1951, at a meeting of the administrative body of the Catholic University at which she was present, though already very ill, someone said, "Let's promise to the Sacred Heart that we shall found the Faculty of Medicine if he will give Armida Barelli the voice again." She answered, writing with difficulty these words on a note that she passed to the chairman of the meeting: "On the contrary, I renounce my voice and want the Faculty of Medicine."
Can you read that?
She was quite ill there, wasn't
Yeah.
she?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No?
Invece voglio la facoltà di medicina e rinuncio alla facoltà.
The next series of slides tell of the founding and the organization of the publishing house, the Opera della Regalità. A congress about the kingdom of Christ, promoted by the Catholic University and held in Milan in May of 1926, and above all, the promulgation of the encyclical Quas Primas, inspired Father Gemelli and Armida Barelli to found the Opera della Regalità. The encyclical had great influence on Father Gemelli, who was literally struck by it. He understood the force of the truth of its content and recognized one of the characteristics of Franciscan spirituality in that doctrine. In June of 1929, the first number of Adveniat was issued. After pointing out the basic ideas of Opera della Regalità, Armida Barelli wrote, "Dear friends, we shall build the future together, or better still, the heart of the King, whom we want known and loved by people all over the world, will build it."
The picture on the right there has been used all over the United States.
Since then, the Opera della Regalità has dedicated itself to liturgical service, especially through the publication and distribution of the bulletin, which we would translate as Living with the Church. Opera della Regalità and the Liturgical Apostolate were the first in Italy to issue and spread publications of a liturgical nature available to all people. Among the most practical of the activities of Opera della Regalità are the publication of leaflets with the texts of the Sunday Masses and a short explanation, and booklets on the sacraments, on prayer, and on Scripture. Retreats for lay people and priests were organized at the oases, and later liturgical weeks. These are still very much requested in Italy. Father Matteo Crowley, the apostolate of the Sacred Heart, spread the message of Père Lemagnolle all over the world. He, Father Gemelli, and Armida Barelli worked together to make night adoration in the home a reality. When Father Matteo returned to Italy after many years, he said he did not recognize the Italian Church, as it had been deeply transformed by the spiritual action of the institutions guided by Armida Barelli. One must say that the Vatican Council has given new light and deeper meaning to the ideals which had inspired the founders of Opera della Regalità from its beginning.
The birth of the student's residence, Marianum, is due to her courageous spirit of initiative and strong will. It started its activities in 1938 to help the most successful female students who wished to attend the University of the Sacred Heart.
No, that's on the other side of the street museum. The next section has to do with the various oases.
At Assisi was opened with a course on liturgy preached by the Bishop of Assisi. The oasis opened its door at once to those who felt the need of restoring their spirit in Franciscan places.
Okay. Thank you.
Here we see Monsignor Mazzetti blessing the little
Another one.
chapel of the Holy Virgin in the
Maybe.
garden at the oasis Bona Mattei. The first dear director of the oasis is with him.
She retired just a couple years ago. She has very bad cataracts and she's almost blind.
San Damiano was the choir of
Mickey.
St. Clare and her followers. The small garden of St. Clare.
Okay.
Cachar,
Mickey?
Cachari, and all the other Franciscan places continued to offer relief to those who spent some time at the oases. After some years, other oases were built. The oasis of St. Francis at La Verna rose during the war, notwithstanding many difficulties. Now it is a wonderful reality located near the Church of the Stigmata. She has to go to
Another one? Mickey? Okay.
Split Rock.
This is the chapel of the Stigmata.
She has to go one more.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
This is Split Rock.
Mm-hmm.
The oasis, Holy Mary of the Angels at Urba, was a gift of the Friars Minor of the Lombard province. It was very dear to Father Gemelli and Armida Barelli, who often went there. This is the little chapel of the Holy Virgin at the end of the Lane of the Cypresses. Father Gali, the first and only spiritual assistant of the oasis, hanging the crosses of the 14 stations of the Way of the Cross on the trees.
And, yeah. Go up and yeah. Yeah. Yeah, isn't that Leticia Vanzetti? Yeah, I'm sure it is. She's the one who put all these slides together, that lady. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Here Monsignor Mazzetti goes to bless the little chapel of St. Francis at the end of one of the lanes. St. Francis weeps because love is not loved. Here is the oasis.
No, wait a minute. That's a better picture of Letizia with the Archbishop. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Charisano, Calabria.
Gerisano and Tom.
Gerisano.
Now, two of those, Mickey. Do another one. Yeah, that's the close-up.
This oasis was once a Franciscan convent in the heart of Calabria. It rises near the wonderful woods of Sila.
Another picture. Another picture. Mm-hmm.
It is dedicated to St. Anthony. After the death of Armida Barelli, other oases rose. At Greccio, the oasis Gesù Bambino, or Holy Child, near the Franciscan sanctuary of the Crib.
The oases when we were over there. Yeah. This is the Virgin in the life of Armida Barelli, and this is a photo of Lourdes. Once Angelina Paterno, the central president of the Women of Catholic Action, reproached Armida, "Whenever you speak, you mention the Sacred Heart, and you always go directly to him. On the contrary, I can go to Jesus only through Mary." Ida answered, "You are right. I too believe that Mary is the best way to go to the Sacred Heart." After that, she wanted the phrase, "Adveniat per Mariam," to be added to the invocation, "Heart of Jesus, may your kingdom come," which was the usual invocation that they used before meetings. Her devotion to the Virgin showed itself in the numerous pilgrimages to the sanctuaries dedicated to the Blessed Mother in Italy and to Lourdes, organized for members of the feminine youth of Catholic Action. She prepared them with great love and took part in them in a spirit of penitence. She also went to Fatima. Armida Barelli writes, "From the 1st to the 7th of May, 1947, I was at Fatima for the international pilgrimage of the Associations of Catholic Action." Here is Armida Barelli with her collaborators. Armida Barelli continues in her writing. Do you want to identify any of these people? Yeah, okay.
La Barelli è il cappellino tondo.
Yeah.
From the left, Armida is looking down.
Yeah.
Dietro Armida, in piedi, col castello,
That one behind the
è
window.
Letizia Vanzetti.
That's Letizia Vanzetti with a hat on.
She doesn't remember the others.
Some of
Mhm.
those clothes look
Well, I
almost,
would say that was, oh.
some of those clothes look almost modern.
Yeah, well, some of the clothes look kind of modern, don't they?
I remember when she
Armida Barelli continues in her writing. At Fatima, during the procession, I had the honor to carry the beautiful statue of the Holy Virgin, made according to the directions of Lucy, the seer of Fatima, together with the representatives of Spain, Russia, and Poland. A leader of the Portuguese Association came near me and told me, "Remember that the first time one has the honor to carry the statue of the Virgin, one obtains whatever grace she asks for." At once I thought of particular graces that I wished. What shall I ask for? I was rather perplexed. But as soon as I had the statue of the Virgin on my shoulders, I forgot everything and implored, "Virgin of Fatima, the Christian victory in the next election."
And what shall I offer you, dear Virgin, if you answer my prayer? I looked at the statue. It had a silver rosary in the hands. I had round my neck a gold rosary of 15 decades, which had been a present of the feminine youth on the 10th anniversary of the association, and it had been blessed by Pius XI. When on August 15, 1943, my house had been bombed, I had lost everything but the rosary, which I always wore around my neck. I told the Holy Virgin, I promise to send you my gold rosary if the Christians will win the next election, as this is the only way we can have Christian laws and a Christian government. I seem to hear a voice at the bottom of my soul, continues Armida Barelli. Why do you want to wait? Why don't you make your offer at once? All right, at once. As soon as I was free, I looked for a priest and gave him the gold rosary, asking him to take it to the chaplain on behalf of an Italian pilgrim with the request to put it in the hands of the Virgin of Fatima and leave it there always. The thing seemed to be very difficult. I flew back to Italy, but I must tell you that I still had some sorrow in my heart. At the end of May 1947, I received a letter from the Portuguese Feminine Youth saying that the gift had been accepted. I was moved and full of joyful hope for my beloved country. I knelt down at once to thank the Holy Virgin, and at that moment I was certain that the gift had been accepted. Father Gemelli commented in one of his writings, what Armida Barelli did during the electoral campaign of 1948, going all over Italy to speak to the women of Catholic Action, proved her authentic love for her country. She spent many nights traveling. Hers was sincere love for her country and zeal for the good of our land.
On August the 15th, 1952, Armida Barelli died. Father Gemelli writes, after a whole life spent in action, illness and decline of energy came. A bulbar policy confined her to bed or to the armchair. But physical pain did not prevent her from working. In fact, she worked until the last moment, using strength which was nearly extinguished. When she could speak no longer, she used to write, and when her right hand could not work any longer, she wrote with her left hand until a few hours before her death. When in her last hours she asked whether she still had many hours of life, I answered that she still had more to suffer because she could scarcely breathe. As she had not been able to speak for months, she smiled sweetly to thank me. She looked at the Virgin with her divine Son in her arms and pointed with a tired gesture at the statue, which expressed the greatest pain on earth. She died at Marzio on the Feast of the Assumption in 1952. The little girls of the village went to the mountains to pick white flowers and put them on her coffin. The room at Marzio where Armida Barelli died is still the object of pilgrimages. Its extreme simplicity has the appeal of poverty. That empty room is rich with a presence which the eyes cannot see, but which is caught only by the soul. Prayers hardly begun stop on the lips, uncertain between petition and praise. Sometimes somebody more resolute begins to say the De Profundis, but people often say the Magnificat. Armida Barelli was buried temporarily in the little cemetery of Marzio. On March the 8th, 1953, her body left the mountainous solitude of Marzio after spending the night in the local parish church. Her coffin arrived in Milan on a bright sunny day. The crown of the Alps, polished by the winds, was around Milan as happens on the most beautiful days, and this was the kiss of the town to its great daughter who had returned in death. Over 12,000 young women from all over Italy followed the coffin from the Sforza Castle, where they had met it, to the Piazza San Ambrogio. Her body lay in state for one day in the chapel of the university, and on the following day the coffin was carried along the cloisters while the Miserere and the Magnificat were sung. Then her body was buried in the heart of the university under the high altar, where every day the Lord is adored in the Eucharist, and where there now rest nearby Blessed Contardo Farini, Father Gemelli, Monsignor Olgiati, Ludovico Necchi, and Count Lombardo.
On March 8, 1960, the Archbishop of Milan, Monsignor Montini, opened the process of beatification of Armida Barelli. On July 10, 1970, the Tribunal of Milan closed the informative process and the cause passed to Rome, where it is still in care of the Holy Congregation of the Cause of the Saints. Father Gemelli writes in his will, proceed with the cause of beatification of Vico Necchi and Armida Barelli. The Church will decide. As for myself, I have received so much supernatural good from both that I should like their example to be shown to everybody. I won't see the triumph of these souls which I have loved so much while I am alive. I trust that God may show them to me as saints. This is what we too hope, trusting in what Armida Barelli called her talisman. Always trust the Holy Spirit, the Holy Heart, in happy hours. I can't read this.
Not to prevaricate.
Not to prevaricate, in sad hours not to be overcome, in difficulties to overcome them, in trials to increase their value, in work to do it with supernatural spirit, in the choice of your vocation to understand and accomplish the will of God, in every circumstance of life, in order to live always in the state of grace and to have the grace of God at the time of your death when he wants it to be.
Yeah. It's good. I did when I saw that.